Our club here in Pasadena is really, really fortunate to have you with us tonight, David. Let's give him a warm Pasadena welcome.
So, I'm gonna race through this because at 10:30 tonight, I've got to take my 14-year-old to see the latest Avengers movie, which is 3 hours. And you know the movie isn't starting at 10:30. It's previews and everything, so at 11 o'clock when you're all enjoying your sleep, I'm gonna be sleeping in a theater.
Me too.
There you go. He couldn't wait until tomorrow because everybody at school is going to be talking about it. He didn't know spoilers. So, no, I'm not going to race through this. Thank you for having me, Lynn. I greatly appreciate it. And to all of you, a great organization here. It's an honor to be speaking with you tonight. So, 8-year-old Martin Richard attended one of the most famous events his great city has ever sponsored. Every single year, people fly in from all over the world to run in his city's marathon. This was the most exciting day of this little 8-year-old boy's life. And he was at the finish line cheering on the runners as they came past. He was standing next to his parents, his brother Henry, his sister Jane, and Martin was smiling like an 8-year-old boy would do at an event like this. He didn't hear the explosion. He didn't feel his entire torso ripped apart. And as he was lying on the ground with his horrified parents standing over him, looking down at him, and then next to him, his sister, who had her leg blown off. The last conscious thought that he had was staring at the sky before he passed away. He was one of the 4 people killed on April the 15th, 2013 at the Boston Marathon. 260 other people besides him had life-altering injuries, and to this day and for the rest of their lives, they will always have a reminder of the horror that took place. In 2015, his killer, there were 2 of them, one of them died in the chase, you may remember on the news, was sentenced to death for his involvement in the terror attack. You may have seen this week Bernie Sanders suggesting that all felons, including terrorists, rapists, child molesters, murderers, pedophiles, and the list goes on, should be allowed to vote, even if they're still serving time in prison. Asked during a CNN interview, and by the way, it was CNN FN, just for my defense. You may have seen this week during the interview, CNN, they had a town hall, and it was in New Hampshire, and somebody asked him whether he believed that people like the Boston Marathon bomber should be disenfranchised. Sanders said no and suggested that all restrictions on voting rights erode American democracy. If somebody commits a serious crime, sexual assault, murder, they're going to be punished. They're going to be in jail for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. Their whole lives, but what happens when you commit a serious crime? But I think the right to vote is inherent to our democracy. Yes, for even terrible people. Forgive my Bernie impression. Not to ever be outdone by extremism in her own party, Willie Brown's pet project, Kamala Harris, you're in California, you know what I'm talking about, said that this is a conversation that we should all have. Allowing criminals the right to vote would be considered extreme. I think everybody in this room would agree with that. And laughed at in our national dialogue if the left weren't so crazy. In just a few past months, 2019, we're in April, at the end of it. Here's just a partial list of what the Democrats are standing up and running on. reparations for slavery, abolishing the Electoral College, which means all of our neighbors, our friends and family in New York and Illinois, get to decide who belongs in the White House. Everybody else, forget about it. Allowing 16-year-olds to vote. Anybody had a 16-year-old at some point in their life here? Do you think they understand economic systems beyond what their count is on Instagram, maybe?
They understand free stuff.
They stood for and stand for abolishing ICE and removing our borders. Allowing for women to have fetuses aborted all the way up to and even past 9 months. The elimination of all private insurance. And placing an openly anti-Semitic Congresswoman on the Foreign Affairs Committee and defending her even in light of her comments that are in no way other than anti-Semitic. The list can go on and on and on, and it would all be laughable if it were not for one very scary and real fact. And that fact is this: as of this morning, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, who just jumped in, Creepy Joe, are polling higher than Donald Trump in some of the battleground states. Now, of course, the election isn't for a year and a half, and most people are not in tune like you are all here tonight. They will get in tune probably after Labor Day 2020, as so many people do during elections. But what does this say about our electorate, our neighbors, our citizens, where these extreme positions are polling at parity with capitalism, free markets, and conservatism? If you go on social media, which I don't think represents most Americans, by the way, but it does get the conversation going for our media, our mainstream media, more on that in just a moment, you see a massive number of people who all not only support these policies, but will label you a racist, a xenophobe, a bigot. Did I mention racist again? Sexist, Islamophobe. Just throw any word and put ist at the end of it. That's our vernacular today. Because if you question these policies that they're standing up for, you're an epithet. So how did we get here? How did we get to this point where 2019, 50% of our country want to take us in this direction that we view here as insane, as extreme, but half this country believes is the right way to go? Well, it's been a long time coming. It's not a sudden occurrence. This is the country my father moved us to in 1977. Although I don't have much of an accent left, a couple of whiskeys maybe, I was born and raised in London, England. My father was an entrepreneur, grew up in World War II. My grandfather fought the Nazis and was a prisoner of war in Nazi-occupied France for 4 years. My dad grew up in the German Blitz. You know your history, 71 nights in the tube before they moved him to Northampton outside of London. So England in the 1970s was a very socialist. I was too young, I was 8 years old when I came here. It was a very socialist economy. We had strikes every single week. From any utility you care to mention, gas, electricity, down to our milkmen. We had milkmen back in the day. Anybody else? My family, all my family moved to different corners of the world. My great uncle, he moved to Switzerland. That was the Cayman Islands of the 70s. My other uncle and my cousins moved to Australia. My father moved us here to Southern California. I grew up in Woodland Hills in the 80s. And in 1977, I went to public school. In 1978, I was ripped out of public school because Jerry Brown decided busing. Now, that was the beginning of the 40 years of decline here in California. And we all know where California stands today. It is no longer the best business climate. It is no longer the best schools that it was in 1977. It is down pretty close to the bottom. We're kind of tied with Alabama. And education, I'm sorry, Alabama and Mississippi are also down there. 48, 49, and 50. But it started before that. It started before Reagan left the governor's mansion in Sacramento. It goes all the way back to the Frankfurt School. And those here who are readers, you know what I'm talking about. The Marxists and the economists, and the communists, I should say, that grew up and went to school in the Goethe University in Frankfurt were not welcome in 1930s Germany. Yes, even Germany didn't want communists. And they found refuge in the United States, specifically at the Columbia University, where they thanked America for their refuge by subverting it, ensconcing themselves in academia and teaching generations of open-minded students how to question everything. Moral relativism was the lesson of the day and the lesson of the decade that has now turned into 7 decades. Many of their students became professors themselves. They ended up teaching the boomers who followed the beatnik generation. These young teachers hid in the universities, yet on the weekends they marched in the streets against every cause they felt went against their utopian mindset, while their contemporaries were sent to Southeast Asia. They successfully adopted the second wave feminists, the countercultural movement, the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, all eventually taking over the ivory towers of our universities across this country. And many of the students the Frankfurt School taught became teachers and professors who went on to teach the next generation of teachers and professors, and today we are now indoctrinating our children with the 3rd generation of the Frankfurt School. Many of them also went into media, corporate America, or government positions. This is what the Italian communist theoretician Antonio Gramsci coined the long march through the institutions. You've heard that term. It's where it comes from. We know the results. Today, schools require comfort circles if a conservative has the audacity to come and speak to their students. We can no longer refer to each other as male or female. A good friend of mine, a special forces veteran from Iran and Iraq, he now works at a local college here in Southern California. He just received a letter. He sent it to me by email yesterday or Tuesday, I think it was, from the, now get this, from the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at his school. Let me say that again, folks. A 6-figure position at a local college titled the Director of Diversity and Inclusion. And it required his presence at a gender workshop. The free speech ideals at college are not just under attack, but are now totally restricted under the guise of not offending anyone. We have Antifa, masked and hooded youth violently protesting the audacity of a Ben Shapiro or a Michael Knowles when they speak at universities. I had a guest on my show, Steve Hayward. He's a professor at UC Berkeley and a contributor at Powerline.com. He told me he wanted Charles Murray, whose book The Bell Curve made liberal heads explode in the 90s. You may recall they misinterpreted his study regarding IQ and race, and of course he was now a racist because he did a study on this. Everything is racism. Professor Hayward wanted Charles Murray to speak to his class, his lecture hall, but to have him come and speak to his class, they had to do it hidden from sight. Without announcing who their guest was, he knew there would be a protest. He told his students to all turn off their phones, no pictures, no texts, no Facebook, no Instagrams, and they hid Charles Murray, an accomplished author of many, many books, under a raincoat from his car, like he was being indicted by the Justice Department, and led him into the lecture hall. Now, according to Steve, the students absolutely loved Murray's lecture. They all stated they learned so much from him because it's a new perspective that they were not getting elsewhere on campus. The problem isn't the students, folks. They're hungry for knowledge. But after 70 years of the descendants from the Frankfurt School in academia, we are now facing a profound set of choices for the future of America. On one side, we have the normals. That's you, folks, by the way. Congratulations. You, I, every other hardworking person that wants to provide for their families and to better their country, to be left alone by an encroaching centralized government, and generally approve of the policies of President Donald Trump, no matter what you think of him personally. And the other side. This other side is loud and perpetually angry. They have not stopped shouting at us since losing the unlosable election of 2016. They own academia. They own the media. They own pop culture. We see them in our sports and in our corporations. As the schools have been seeding them into the institutions for decades. And yes, we even see them on the right. Fifth columns under the guise of principled conservatism. These former icons of the conservative movement, principled conservatives, they call themselves. People like Bill Kristol, Charlie Sykes, Max Boot, Jennifer Rubin, and others did everything that they could to prevent a President Donald Trump. They talked a good game about tax reform, reducing regulations, and appointing conservative judges. But even after this president has shown he is doing more for the conservative cause than any president since Reagan, and in some cases even more so than Reagan, our never-Trumpers have not gone so quietly into the swamp. But much like their dismayed friends on the left, they have doubled down. Never Trump is still very much a thing. Bill Kristol, Max Boot, and the rest of the Never-Trumpers deeply feel that Trump doesn't fit the mold the patricians, like Bill Kristol, thinks is the mold for conservatism. And you may agree with him. He's got some followers still. The Kristol's cocktail party set, which mostly are made up of media elites that he became chummy with over the past 35 years, no longer have the keys to the kingdom. They have been kicked out of Trump's DC for very good reason. They did everything they possibly could to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. And Kristol even went as far as running a frightfully inept candidate. Does anybody remember Utah's Evan McMullen? Or as conservative Twitter calls McMuffin? On one of the last, if not the last, Weekly Standard cruise, I sat down with Bill Kristol and did an interview for my show. It was right after the election in 2016. And I asked him, I said point blank, I said, Bill, you worked your heart out for the past year to prevent this happening. Now, he is President-elect Donald Trump. Will you support him? And he said to me, Dave, he says, if he pushes for conservative judges, repeals regulations, and pushes tax reform, I will stand behind him.
Where is he?
Where is he?
He lied to me and he lied to you because he lied to the camera. And I've got no ill will to Bill Kristol personally. He seems like a good family man. But his Twitter feed against Trump, if you've been watching it, reads like Mother Jones or Media Matters, filled with hate, not just towards this president, but towards you if you support this president. his new dismal effort called The Bulwark. Anybody heard of that? It's a new publication, online magazine, after losing Weekly Standard. And he got into a shouting match online with who? A Democrat? A liberal? A progressive? No. The Bulwark's #1 enemy for the entire month of March was Victor Davis Hanson, fellow at the Hoover Institute, author of many a book, his latest, The Case for Trump, great book, by the way. We just interviewed VDH. We went up to his farm in the Central Valley, which is in miles of almond trees. It's the type of place that Bill Kristol and Max Boot would drive through as fast as they possibly could from an event in Silicon Valley down to Beverly Hills. This is where Victor Davis Hanson lives. It's called Red State, California. Yes, there is actually still a thing. I asked VDH why these former icons of the conservative movement don't acknowledge Trump is one of the, if not the, most conservative president of our lifetimes when it comes to actually pushing conservative policies. His reply, as always, is brilliant. Victor said, their problem with Trump is that they think he is so far beyond the pale, so far beyond presidential behavior, that Trump, the man, nullifies all of their previous commitments to issues they stood for and supposedly shared with Trump. So Victor asks, how do we adjudicate this? He says, well, let's take a look at Trump's first 2.5 years and compare this with other presidents. Let's look at Clinton. Did Trump have sex with an intern on the Resolute desk? Or frisk a girl in the hallway? No, he didn't. Let's look at LBJ. Very successful president. Did Trump pick up animals by their ears? Does he pull out his genitals and expose them to his staff? Does he sit on the toilet and defecate while discussing policy with his staff? Did he have affairs in the White House? No. Okay, so let's go back to JFK. Does he deflower virgins on the presidential bed? Does he have orgies in the pool with his aide? No. Okay, so maybe we should go all the way back to Harry Truman. Does he write letters to music critics threatening to emasculate their genitals? No. And I didn't know Harry did that, by the way. Is Ivanka Trump scurrying around the White House, setting up trysts for her husband the way Eleanor Roosevelt did for Lucy Mercer? No. The constant barrage of incredulity by the never-Trumpers, where they are standing on the principle of my principles, on the pedestal, I should say, of my principles, suggests that they and most of the left don't know their history of presidential behavior while they are in office. They are blinded by their hatred of the man and being kicked out of the cocktail circuit and being relegated to the basement of the Trump derangement news of CNN and MSNBC, and it's about them. It's about their egos. They hate that nobody outside their small group of followers, nobody listens to them anymore. Is Trump unconventional? Well, could you imagine a Romney or a George W. Bush or even Obama getting into a wrestling ring? Not at all. The man owned casinos, for crying out loud, and has the strangest mop of hair, which most of us thought was a rug for years before I actually saw it blowing in the wind during the campaign. But this is a man who was also in commercial real estate in New York City, one of the most corrupt and dirty industries in already one of the most corrupt and dirty cities in the country. The man openly stated during the campaign that he bribes politicians because that's what you do if you want to get anything done.
That's true.
The man is nothing like a politician, and people love that. Politicians are despised, and that, along with his policy and his economic successes, is why you should probably do what Goldman Sachs and the rest of Wall Street did just last week, and that is give Trump a 70% chance of re-election. Does he lie? Well, if you believe the Mueller probe, apparently so. And suddenly, there is moral outrage on CNN and MSNBC, because they haven't been outraged up until this point. He is a liar. He should be impeached because, you know, he tried to obstruct an investigation which proved he never did anything wrong or illegal, but he tried to obstruct it anyway. Listen, I would love to ask the incredulous Brian Tater Stelter, whatever his name is, Rachel Maddow, Anderson Cooper, and Morning Joe the following. Where was your outrage when Obama lied hundreds of times saying you can keep your doctor and insurance company and we'll save you $2,500? Where was your outrage when Obama lied about the Iran deal and we later find out he sent billions in cash on pallets in the middle of the night like it's a drug deal movie? Where was your outrage when Hillary and Susan Rice said Benghazi occurred because of a video? Where was your outrage when Attorney General Eric Holder lied to Congress about Fast and Furious? You remember the gun smuggling that Obama approved, which led to at least 150 Mexicans dying, being killed? You remember Holder, by the way, Obama's described wingman. He called himself a wingman. They have a problem with Barr. But Eric Holder actually stood up and says, I'm here to protect this president. And he was actually held in contempt by Congress. Where was the outrage? And where was your outrage when Obama said the fence between America and Mexico is basically complete? Yet the Department of Homeland Security admitted that only 36.3 miles, or 5%, of the border is fenced. Where was your outrage when Obama told the world that there has never been a stronger friend to Israel than the United States, that behind the scenes he used his own State Department to finance the election against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu? 2015, using a shady splinter group and a White House staff member, Jeremy Byrd. Your tax dollars, folks. Where was the outrage when Obama stoked racial hatred by repeating a provable lie of hands up, don't shoot? Where Michael Brown was shot in Ferguson, Missouri, the media ran with it, and the lie continued, and Obama never diffused the situation by telling the truth. So we saw riots, we saw massive property damage, we saw people injured, we saw racial strife, unlike we haven't seen in this country in 30, 40 years. Even the Washington Post gave Obama 4 Pinocchios on that one. Listen, the list could go on and on and on. If you Google this, there are over 300 lies with the Obama administration. Where was the outrage in our mainstream media? There is no outrage when it doesn't serve the media. They are complicit in what the Democrats say. They will carry the water for the DNC. They are the free publicity arm of Democrats and socialists. They don't speak for you and I. From their cocooned echo chambers, in their newsrooms, their cocktail parties in New York and Los Angeles and DC, their charity balls and their fundraisers, they are laughing at us. All of you, me, and anybody else that considers themselves a right of center American. We are the great unwashed. They are smarter than us, better educated, at least on paper that is. They have more money than us, and they literally hate us. As disgraced FBI agent Peter Strzok texted his lover, Lisa Page, just went into a Southern Virginia Walmart. I could smell the Trump support. And smell, by the way, is in capital letters. All capital letters. Is it any wonder the only people watching CNN are strapped in their airport shoe shine chairs, Clockwork Orange style? The good news, if there is any in any of this, whoever is the nominee out of the 137 Democrats running, whether it's Kamala, Bernie, or Biden, which I think will be the final 3, by the way, they will be running against the most unconventional politician this country has ever seen. With Kamala's Me Too-ness while ignoring how she provided Willie Brown sexual favors to advance her career, or Bernie's totally insane, off-the-wall policies that he is now pushing for and free everything, or if America wants Obama 2.0 and goes back to creepy Uncle Joe Biden, get your popcorn out, folks, because this is going to be an absolutely fascinating and entertaining campaign. The conservatives must understand one thing, that they have a massive fight on their hands. It isn't just the politicians or the schools. It's Hollywood, where social activism has reduced our most famous canons like Star Wars into a series of woke propaganda pieces. We had Bill Whittle on our show. Anybody know Bill? He came on to discuss how Kathleen Kennedy, the producer of Star Wars, single-handedly killed this franchise. Because hashtag, the Force is female. What? Right? The Force is the Force. It's a religious thing, pseudo-religious, I don't know what it is. But now, all of a sudden, it's about females. It's about gender equality. And this spring, we saw the usually highly entertaining Marvel Comics universe, and I'm seeing one tonight, or sleeping through one tonight, allowed Captain Marvel. It is a movie with a female superhero to be hijacked by the leading star, Brie Larson. Now, I didn't see this movie, but apparently she castigated all white men. She actually stated that she doesn't care about the opinions of white male film reviewers, only minorities. She said this. Now, Brie is white herself, so you can't get much more woke than that. Her movie was considered a middling effort by those who saw it. Meanwhile, another female comic book character, Wonder Woman, came out a couple of years ago. It knocked it out of the park. It was one of the best movies of the year, I thought. And last time I checked, I'm a white male. We see this on late night TV, where we used to all go to watch Johnny and then Jay, and slowly kind of faded away after David Letterman kind of went crazy. But he was good at the beginning. Now you got Kimmel and Colbert. Isn't it Colbert? To a lesser extent, Fallon. They give us a steady diet of Trump derangement. And they're not even funny. They're just angry. Who wants Jimmy Kimmel, who used to have a show back in the late 90s, early 2000s, The Man Show, where you have young girls, young women, scantily clad, jumping trampolines in slow motion, that he now gets to tell us how awful this president is. It's the corporations, where the woke crowd have graduated their college and are now making boardroom decisions like Gillette's ad attacking men as rapists, sexual deviants, and bullies. Or Nike taking a knee with the NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick. Or just this week, I don't know if you saw this, folks. The brawny man has just been replaced by 3 diverse women in plaid on their packaging with a suggestion that, and this is on the paper towel package, you're going to see it next time you go to the supermarket and crack up. Strength has no gender. Yes, even our paper towels are now woke. Before your eyes roll too far into the back of your heads, think about the stupidity for a minute, though, of what this means. Brawny is now saying that it takes 3 women to do the job of 1 man! This is the world we live in now, folks.
Very funny.
Everything is viewed through the lens of your race, of your gender, of your sexual preference, religion, and did I mention race? This is what we've been fighting against for decades. Martin Luther King says, judge a man by the content of his character, not by the color of his skin. That is now downright hateful to these people. He would be considered a right-wing Republican today. And he was technically a Republican at one point. Yes. The reason I think Kamala Harris, our senator, congratulations, California, will rise to the top is she is the trifecta that the woke crowd is looking for. She's a she's a woman of color. Most people assume she's African American. She's not, by the way. She's of Indian descent. And she's a hardened socialist, checking the boxes of the voters. That's how it is. Many of your liberal friends only voted for Hillary because of her plumbing. Yet most people voting for her couldn't explain complex economic systems to you. Ask them about Milton Friedman. Ask them about Friedrich Hayek or Adam Smith. And before they can give you their opinion, they'll ask you, well, how many Instagram followers do they have? Ask them why they think redistribution, as explained by Keynes or Krugman, would increase productivity and GDP, where in every country that has been practiced worldwide, we've seen it fail. Is anyone enjoying the images coming out of Venezuela? Oh, and how many of our friends were excited to go down to Cuba and they quietly came back and admitted that, you know, Cuba's retro 50s life isn't all that romantic when you actually have to kind of spend time there. Oh, but Dave, they didn't do socialism right. It wasn't democratic socialism. What's that, like socialism without the gulags and the work camps? Sign me up. Now, I hate the political comparisons to Hitler and the Nazis. And the left uses them as epithets towards us, completely diminishing the horrors of the Third Reich. But if we actually look at what we're seeing happening on today's left, it's incredible but true. Without the mass concentration camps, this is what Hitler believed. Read Mein Kampf. And you know, 1, he believed Jews and capitalism were the cause of Germany's and Weimar Republic's problems. He believed identity politics were necessary. He believed a larger, more centralized federal government was best. He believed in taking away all of our guns. He believed in eugenics and abortion, actually pointing to the radical politics and strategies of Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. In 1933, Hitler called for a boycott of Jewish-owned businesses. Today's American left repeatedly call for boycotts against businesses they don't like, such as Chick-fil-A, Fox News, Hobby Lobby. Hitler used the brown shirts to intimidate political enemies. Today, Soros-financed groups like Antifa attack free speech by conservatives on campus and send angry flash mobs to harass Republican officials during peaceful dinners in restaurants or to their homes of conservative-leaning news anchors. Hitler employed a wholesale propaganda education model. He believed in government-controlled curriculum in the schools. Anybody tried to help their children with their Common Core math in the past 7, 8 years? I have no clue what's going on in division anymore, folks. Hitler wanted control over media, movies, and news. And what a lot of people don't know, something Dr. Warren Farrell discussed with me on a show we just recently did in his book, The Boy Crisis. Many of the Hitler youth came from families where the fathers weren't present in the homes. Think about this in our inner cities, folks. From the horrors of slavery after the Emancipation Proclamation, black families steadily improved their lot in life. Of course, Jim Crow and the racist policies promulgated by the Democrats kind of, caused a lot of other issues for them. They were awful. But it wasn't until the Great Society in the 1960s that we saw black families fall apart. According to Walter Williams, before the Great Society, 22% of black families didn't have a father in the home. 50 years after the government expanded the welfare state, more than 70% of black children are now raised by single-parent households. That's a 250% increase. And we wonder why blue cities like Chicago, Baltimore, and Memphis are crime-ridden. So when someone calls conservatives Nazis, remind them that it's the left that is propagating exactly what Hitler did in the 1930s. But they think government knows better than us. They are run by people who mostly have never owned a business. They have never made payroll. And in some cases, they don't even have their own families. Yet they know better than you. They can make policy because they have, quote, unquote, good intentions, like nationalizing student loans. What happened in the past 10 years when the government backed the student loans? My son is about to start university, where it will cost $50,000 a year. This is for a school that 20 years ago cost $40,000 for all 4 years. This is what happens when the government decides to take care of the problem. We have to pay for it. The other major thing government got their grubby mitts on 10 years ago, anybody want to take a guess? Healthcare. Who here has seen their rates double and lost their doctors and insurance companies? The exact opposite of what was sold as Obamacare. So we're now at a time when roughly half the country believes in allowing for the government to take over every aspect of our lives. The Julia model. You may remember this from the 2012 election. They showed an imaginary every woman. They called Julia, basically she's going to be taken care of from cradle to grave, from preschooling through death. Her life partner was big government. This is no longer the country of rugged individualism, folks. We've raised a generation of pajama boys. This is the fascism that the left loudly claim to be against. From Hollywood, whose leftist ideology crafts on movies and pseudo-documentaries, Inconvenient Truth, got Gore a Nobel Prize, and guess what? It was all wrong. We now see the Obamas on the board of Netflix. HBO's two biggest shows are hate-filled liberal agitprop, Bill Maher and John Oliver. Who's representing conservatives on these networks? We see American fascism indoctrinating the youth in public education K through 12, as manifest in Common Core. As mentioned, as parents, we have no idea how to teach our kids this new way of learning, so it's all up to the schools. Take the parents out of the equation. That's what they wanted, so they could teach our kids anything, and they teach our kids anything. We see American fascism in social media. And if you think that it doesn't impact you because you may not be on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, which is probably a good thing, by the way, Google and Apple now run the world. All your information is derived from search. And by the way, if you're using Google, I would ask you write down duckduckgo.com. That is an alternative search engine to Google. It does not track you. So next time you search for a car to buy, next time you go on the internet, not every ad you see is for the car that you just searched for. That's how they get you. DuckDuckGo. It's a search engine. Completely track free. Duck, like quack quack. D-U-C-K, go, G-O.com. But here's the way social media controls our lives. For those that are not on Twitter, you may not know about this, but most of our journalists today live and breathe on Twitter. They're called the blue check marks. They're authenticated individuals that work at the New York Times and the Washington Post and ABC News and CNN. And they talk to each other in open threads that you can go and see. And the news of the day is discussed online, and it then percolates up to the mainstream news. It comes from a couple of hundred people that are all, 99.999% of them, are extreme leftists. Why do you think, if you turn on ABC, CNN, CBS News tonight, that the same 3 stories are on each channel? There's not more news than that? It used to be the New York Times and the AP. Now it's Twitter. And if you dare counter their narrative, because you can, they're public, you can comment. Twitter suspends you. Facebook censors you. And YouTube demonetizes you. This guy right here. We're talking over $1 trillion of programmed hatred towards you. And if you don't play by their speech rules, you lose your voice. And whether or not you are on Facebook or Twitter, it is our public square today. So what can we do? For starters, you're here. Congratulations. You're involved. That's the first step. I wish more people were. but you are a tiny, tiny minority in a sea of blue. The money centered just down the road here in both Silicon Beach and Beverly Hills and upstate in Silicon Valley is massive. Without millions of dollars, and even that's not enough these days, it's almost impossible to fight that level of power that's against you. So my last point is this. How do we fight when it seems like a losing cause? First, no, it's not. Even with all the tech titans, the media, Hollywood, and the schools be running by these people, elections are still very, very close. Many of the districts Democrats won in 2018 were only won by a tiny sliver, a tiny, tiny percentage. And quite frankly, some of those, maybe a little bit shenanigans going on there. Anybody heard of vote harvesting in Orange County? With AOC, Ilhan Omar, and Rashid Tlaib as the face of Democrats today, it is possible to turn the House back in 2020. But we all have to work, and we have to get the message out. We talk with friends, neighbors, and coworkers, but not in a confrontational way. So please, know your audience. If your coworker is wearing a pink knitted hat and has a dump trunk bumper sticker on her car, no, just live and let live. You're not going to get everyone. But with normal people who are probably too busy to keep up with the news, other than what Twitter-inspired DNC spokesholes will tell you on the nightly news propaganda, have a discussion. When a friend at Easter or Passover says, "Can you believe how much Trump lies?" I would answer simply with something like, Obama and Clinton never lied. Google their lies. There are hundreds. Just because CNN didn't report it doesn't mean a tree didn't fall in the forest. By the way, how's that $2,500 healthcare premium savings working for you? I'm not suggesting losing half of your Facebook friends by posting Daily Wire each day. I'm talking about having discussions. This is what I do on my show. We have hour-long discussions. Be kind, be funny, don't be mean. The best approach we can take is humor. Make them appear as silly as they really are. My good friend Evan Sayat, he just wrote a book called Apocalypse Now. You can find it, it's on Amazon. It's a faux children's storybook that you can read to your kids at night or your grandkids at night with cartoons by famous conservative artist A.F. Franco. You may know who he is. He skewers the left as he does so well. Here's a short excerpt. Good night, my love. Yes, I know that you're frightened. So while you doze off, allow me to enlighten. I know about this thing of which they keep warning. I know about this thing they call global warming. When I was your age, they cried global cooling. An ice age, they said. Then they said, hey, just fooling. Next, a hole in the ozone. They swore would cause pain. Then that didn't happen. They yelled, acid rain! But when the rain came down, just as it always did, they conjured up some new things with which to scare kids. First, the birds were diseased, and then the swine, they had the flu. If one didn't get you, the other would do. When the pig and the bird proved not to be bad, they turned to the cow, who would drive us all mad. Well, that didn't happen. No one fell to their knees. Still, they went on undaunted and yelled, killer bees! And when no one was stung, they just kept right on hissing. The real threat, they said, was that the bees had gone missing. The book continues, and you can find it at Amazon. But Evan does so well what we all need to. Laugh at it all. Let them continue making fools out of themselves. And if we point it out enough, the folks in the middle will see how crazy AOC's Green Deal is, or Elizabeth Warren's transparent lies about her ethnicity, or how insane Bernie and Kamala really are. Again, the folks in the middle, the immovable, not the crazies on the far left. That's who we want. You just need a few points. And then we can save the country again for at least another 2 years. Thank you.